Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello and welcome to An Unconventional Life podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Strickland, the founder and CEO of Dissertation Done and Expand Your Authority. Today, I have with me Dr. Dawn Graham. She is a career switch coach. She's a TEDx speaker, a LinkedIn learning instructor, and host of a popular call-in show, Dr. Dawn on Careers, on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, which is channel 132. She's also a regular contributor to Forbes and the career director for the executive MBA program at Wharton in UPenn. So her latest book is Switchers, how smart professionals change careers and seize success. And it combines her experience as a career coach, a licensed psychologist, and a former corporate recruiter to give career switchers the strategies to break through obstacles and land the job they want. So that's amazingly cool. Dr. Graham, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, you are so welcome. I'd like to let everybody know that today's episode is being brought to you by Dissertation Done. Dissertation Done, we help adult doctoral students to get through the dissertation process and graduate as soon as possible. So whether you are approaching the dissertation process and you'd like to proactively go out there and get that guidance and support that all the strongest executives and entrepreneurs know that they need, or you're in the middle of the dissertation process and you feel slowed, stalled, or just plain stuck, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. We'll see if our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program is a good fit for you and see if we can get you to graduation in less than a year. On the flip side, if you've already finished all of that and you're interested in being an expert, like a lot of what we're going to be talking with Dr. Graham about today, you want to be a coach, a consultant, counselor, something along those lines, then the best way to do that is to not only have the first name doctor, but also have literally written the book on your area of expertise. And we can take you from a blank page to a published author in less time than you thought possible. So reach out to us there at dissertationdone.com/book. That's dissertationdone.com/book. And we'll look forward to helping you with that. So again, Dr. Graham, thank you so much and welcome today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, tell me, how is it that you got into this notion of pursuing a doctoral degree in the first place? There's not too many of us out there, and it's a little bit of a strange decision to go out there and pursue that doctoral degree. What was your motivation for doing that?
So I think there were a couple of things. I love to learn, and I think a lot of people who pursue their doctorate really enjoy learning and getting deep knowledge in a certain area. So I think first and foremost, that was kind of a core value that I had. And the reason I went back and got my degree to become a licensed psychologist is because I've worked primarily in business settings my entire career. And it became apparent to me early on that a lot of business is about relationships. It's about how people interact. It's how groups work together to create new ideas and execute new ideas. And I started out my career as a recruiter. And I also did market research. And again, all of these things are very behavioral when it comes to the process of business. And so I did my master's degree in more of an applied organizational area. And when I was thinking about going back to school 4 years later, I really struggled with, should I go the organizational route or should I go something more in line with counseling psychology? And I picked counseling psychology because of that aspect of interactions in business.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of folks who are getting their degrees in psychology that we work with at Dissertation Done, and it's amazing the array of things that you can do with that degree. So it's a really cool and interesting degree. How did the process go once you decided that you're going to go to school, get that degree in counseling psychology? What was the process like for you getting back into school and going through those doctoral level classes?
So I think I was a little bit older because I had taken 4 years to work between my undergrad and my master's. Then I did my master's at night. So I was continuing to work. And then after I had gotten that, I took another 4 years to work full time before deciding to go back. So I think that was actually one of the most helpful parts of the process. As an undergrad, I knew I wanted to get more education, but I had a very wise faculty member tell me, you know what, before you just dive in, get some work experience, figure out what you like to do, what you don't like to do, if what you want to do is really what it's cracked up to be. And that was great because I was very happy to be one of the older students because I felt really certain that this is the path for me. So when I decided to get my doctorate, I went through that process of which degree should I get, which degree is going to add to my knowledge base, which degree is going to give me options in different areas that interest me. I did some informational interviews, and then I researched schools and picked 6 that were focused on counseling psychology, but had a career or a business aspect to it, or a faculty member or more faculty members doing research in areas like group dynamics and other things that would happen in the workplace, because I knew that was where I wanted to specialize and apply my knowledge. So I picked these 6 schools. I went through the application process and interviews, and here we are.
So as you went through the classes and then onto the dissertation, what was that experience like for you? Actually picking your work and getting started on it.
Yeah, so I think for me, when you have worked for a while and you're used to a certain income level, living off of loans and going to school full time was probably one of the biggest parts of the adjustment for me, because it certainly financially was a very difficult thing to do. And so because of that, I think one of the things that was important to me was to stay on task and move through the process as efficiently as possible. So I very much from day one started to dissect and understand what I would need to do to achieve those goals so that I could get back to the workforce and back to earning money in the way I had been used to. So that was really what drove me. And I made sure that I researched internships early. I researched all of that process. And I know that you can't always predict what's going to happen, but I think the more you can understand the program and what's a prerequisite to what and what's coming up and when the comprehensive exams are, and setting time aside to prepare for those, you're going to be much more successful. Because as a lot of people have said, getting a PhD, sometimes it just learning to go through all those steps and all of the requirements and check all the boxes, that in and of itself is another PhD, because there's so many different things that are required, especially when you're doing a clinical PhD, because you have to do practicum hours and internships and clinic hours and other things that maybe some other programs don't have. So you really have to know what those requirements are, so you don't get to the end and realize, wow, I missed a big one.
Right. Yeah, it's tough, big, and sometimes they don't have a guide really helping you figure out how all those pieces fit together. I know recently we sat down to plan out, my son's a freshman in high school, and we sat down to plan out, well, what classes you're going to register for next year. And very quickly we figured out, we've got to figure out the entire rest of your high school career now so that we get all the pieces in place and don't miss something. And it was, I kind of knew that from my previous educational experience, but I just wasn't quite expecting it. Like my son's in high school, and yeah, he's growing up, but there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But yeah, we had to get everything planned out. I'll tell you another thing that you said really would resonate, I think, with a lot of our audience, and that is this notion of, hey, I got to get through this thing and get finished, right? Because the financial thing is killing me. A lot of our students are going to school full time while working full time, so they have that benefit. But yeah, getting out and getting that degree, putting it to use is such a big motivator to actually finish the thing quickly. Were there any kind of tips or hacks or anything like that you picked up along the way to help you get through the process quickly?
I think for me, I was always mapping things out, always making sure I went back to the handbook and made sure that what I was doing made sense. And, I certainly worked with advisors. My program, there were 6 doctoral students in my program. So we we're able to connect and be very close, and that way we can bounce things off of each other and make sure we were all on the right path. But I do think that being organized is one of the things that was most helpful to me, because there's always something to do, and there's always something you need to do before it, and there's always something that's only offered once a year, and if you miss it, now it puts you back a year. And I think you really do have to rely on your organizational skills to be able to anticipate that. Otherwise, it's very easy to kind of get behind in the process. And so I think that to me was probably one of the things I didn't expect, but it was one of the things that I had to work really hard to keep up with.
Yeah. Yeah. Two points about what you said there. Number one, when you're talking about organization, that reminds me a lot of our philosophy with our students is when you're working on your dissertation, the first thing we have to do is figure out exactly what are you going to be doing for your dissertation, not what the topic is or the research question or anything, but how, when you put boots on the ground, how are you going to get this thing done? And if we can plan that out, forget about the dissertation, but just plan out that project first, they feel a lot better about knowing where they're going. And it speaks to that organizational component of really knowing how everything fits in, because then the prerequisites and the what comes first and what needs to come next, they make a lot more sense. And then the other thing that you said, I think is hugely, hugely important, is you had a cohort where everybody could lean on each other. And for folks out there who aren't blessed with a cohort like that, which I know is most folks, find one. Find a group of people that you can kind of lean on, whether it's folks who are going through this right now, whether it's people who've been through it before. Selfishly, I can tell you we do that for our students, but there's a lot of ways of getting that. You need that support to keep you sane, to make you feel normal, because 1% of the population earns a doctoral degree. Chances that you're going to find those people just by bumping into them on the street are pretty low. You need to connect with these people intentionally so that you can feel like what you're doing is normal and not that you're the only oddball out there doing it. That's a big psychological advantage when you know that other people are doing it and they're going through the same struggles you are.
Yeah, I would agree. And that is something that, I had friends who were doing doctoral degrees in other schools and other programs, and we would talk and vent and all of those things just to get that support, because when I was in my early 30s, and a lot of people at that stage were getting married or having kids. And here I am living off of the dollar store and trying to, work overnights just to earn some money while I'm going to school during the day. It was a very different lifestyle, I think, than a lot of people in my core world were living. So it was very important to get that support.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about, being able to lean on each other and everything. The phrase I use with students is you need to find someone to celebrate with and commiserate with. And hopefully they're the same person, because they'll really know what the celebrations mean, but they'll also understand why you're bummed about things sometimes, because that's going to happen quite a bit. Well, so you got through, and you made it through to the other side. What's next after you graduate? Well, actually, how long did it take you to come to terms with the name Dr. Graham? What was that like when you first?
It's funny because I don't really go by that normally. It's obviously a quote unquote stage name for the radio show. But I'm proud of it. And I think anybody who spends the time and discipline earning a degree like that, because it is hard. It's hard from the sense of sticking it out. It's hard from the sense of being self-motivated. Yes, you have to take certain classes, but when it comes to the dissertation or internships or practicum hours or supervision hours, in my case, and all this stuff, nobody's forcing you to do any of that. At the end of the day, you have to document. And I had to document clients and transcribe my sessions and hand all the stuff. There's so many requirements. We had to volunteer at our clinic, a couple of terms, and these were all extra. These are all outside of class things that we were expected to do. And no one's gonna, you don't have to complete your degree or your dissertation. Usually you have a specified period of time up to 10 years. So no one's telling you have to do it this year, you're getting behind or any of that. So I think anyone who's gone through that process and has succeeded end to end has a lot of self-motivation, self-discipline, organizational skills and, you know, maybe a little PTSD coming out the other side, but
most people a little PTSD.
Yeah. But I think for me, you know, you have so many milestones, and I might call them even like, you know, the negative terminology I might use is false summits, because you know, as a psychologist, you have to pass your first year comps, and then you have to get so many practicum hours, and you have to pass your full comps, and then you kind of have to do all of these things. You can do them at your own pace, but you have to do them before you get to the next level. And then you have to finish your clinic hours and your supervision hours and all this stuff. So you feel like you're accomplishing things because of all these milestones. You're like, whew, I passed my comps. Now I can move on to the next thing. Or whew, I passed my dissertation proposal. Like that in and of itself is a huge celebration because it's such a hard thing to do. Whew, I got my dissertation committee to sign off on the next step. That's huge. Or I finished a chapter. So there's so many big pieces that you're kind of feeling accomplished along the way. So when you finally, like, I think, you know, the funniest thing is, I think the dissertation proposal was so much more of a joyous event than even the dissertation defense, because by the time you get to your defense, if you have a good committee, it's really more of a, you know, you're going to pass. I mean, by that point, you should be very, very, very prepared to pass. And if you're not, that's something that is unfortunate with your dissertation committee. But
yeah, I tell students all the time, it's a coronation. It's not really a defense anymore. Some schools it's still a defense. It used to literally be a defense. Like faculty would be trying to knock you down, you know, do whatever they can to destroy you. And if you can stand up to that, then they're like, okay, welcome to the club. And if you can't, then they win. You know,
yeah, I feel like they do that in the proposal stage now. Like they really, and yeah, I got that in the proposal stage, because it's like, why should I embark on a year of work if the proposal isn't solid? So we still get that. It's just at a different part of it. So by the time you get to your defense, you've been beat up for the last year. So they're like, okay, you know, we'll ask you some questions, but we've really asked you most of these before. But then as a psychologist, I had to do an internship for a full year, 2,000 hours of an accredited internship. So that process in and of itself was incredibly stressful to apply to and to get, you know, find one, get accepted. And then you're doing that. So you're technically not graduated, even though you might have done your dissertation or you might have done all of your coursework and your comps. So you're working full time. In my case, it was at the University of Pennsylvania's counseling center, and, you know, 9 to 5 full-time job for a year. And then once you get signed off on all these supervision hours, and you have to have so many group supervision hours and so many individual ones and so much of this and that. And it's, again, you have to track all of this. And it's not like they might today give you some kind of system to do that, but not back in my day. So you had to keep records of all of this and submit it and make sure you were doing the right thing and the right amount of hours in the right places. And then you can graduate. But then as a psychologist, I had to do an additional 2,000 hours of supervised work experience to even be eligible to take the EPPP and the state licensure exams. So my point about saying this false summit is that you constantly think, oh, I made it. But then you're like, well, I didn't make it. I made it here, and then I made it, but nope, I didn't make it yet. So it is a process where, you know, you have to maintain your stamina, because just when you think, whew, I made it, you're like, nope, I have another 2,000 hours I have to do.
So there's always another big thing, but that, I think it also builds. You mentioned stamina, but it also helps to build some confidence, because all of these, you know, what you call false summits, they are real events and real things that you've accomplished. And yes, there's another thing to do, but kind of that's always true in life. It would be nice if if you got the big degree a little sooner in the process, because that's the real thank you. That's the real, you know, thing that you're going after your goal. But even after you graduate, there's always the next thing. I see you've got your book there behind you. I'm sure that was a big accomplishment as well, right?
Yeah, it was a similar process. Again, nobody's forcing you to do it. You don't really have hard and fast deadlines. They're the deadlines you set for yourself. And it's really easy as humans to get distracted by just about anything when you have to, you know, write a chapter. So so it is that discipline, that stamina, that drive of really believing in yourself and that you can do this and sacrifice. I mean, I think anybody who's gotten a doctoral degree will tell you they sacrificed. They couldn't go to somebody's wedding because it was in another town and they didn't have the money or the time. It was comp exam time, or, you know, I mean, insert sacrifice here, but I think we've all had to sacrifice to do that. And you have to be honest with yourself about that, because for some people, maybe that's worth it. For others, you may decide, you know what this is going to get me, or where this is going to get me isn't worth giving up time with my family, or my friends' big events in their life, or owning a house, or whatever it is that's important to you. And that's okay. But I think that is something that we all need to evaluate before we dive into a project like this.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I will tell you, I think the degree, the doctoral degree, is always worth it because there's so many opportunities and so many benefits. It's really hard to see what you're sacrificing in order to get to that degree where the sacrifice isn't worth the degree. But that's my point of view, and certainly someone else could have a different perspective. That idea of choice and being conscious about the decisions you're making, I think, is incredibly important.
I wonder too if it's a little bit of cognitive dissonance. You know, after I spent all this time and money getting this degree, there's no way I'm going to say out loud it wasn't worth it, because that would just screw up my head. But yeah, and I do feel like it was worth it, and I could come up with a dozen reasons why it was worth it and why I'm glad I did it and all of that. But I do think that I think there's a lot. There's so many credentials out there nowadays. There's so many training programs and this and that, and I'm not saying don't get them. I love to learn. I love to do that. But I think sometimes we put too much weight on those as, well, you did this, you must be qualified. And I think there's so much more to it than just checking the boxes and paying the money for the tuition. So I do think they're great achievements, and they definitely say something about a job candidate or about, somebody being qualified in a certain area, but it's not 100%. There are definitely other things to consider.
Yeah, I don't understand why sometimes I see folks who've had their doctoral degree for a while and they continue to get these other letters, other certifications, other, whatever. And my thought process is just like, why? I want you to go on learning forever, and you should continue to do that. But the main thing, and I've had so many of the guests on the podcast tell me the same thing, the main benefit I think that you get from a PhD is you really, truly learn how to learn. And if you need to become an expert in something, as long as you just devote your time to it, you can do it in a relatively short amount of time. And there's this wonderful thing out there called the internet that has so much information, and you're good at pulling pieces of information together and synthesizing them and developing an understanding that I don't know why you want to keep paying tuition in particular to have someone hand that to you on a silver platter, because you can just go find and develop your own kind of learning about whatever topic might interest you. And that includes if you want to be an expert in it because you're going to help a client, or go into another discipline that you haven't studied before. I think that you're qualified now when you have a doctoral degree to learn that stuff yourself and not have to put yourself through more tuitions and programs and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, and it's an interesting perspective, because I've one of the things that I think people don't realize when you get some type of certification, like now that I'm a licensed psychologist, I have to maintain that. I have to get 40 CEUs, and those cost money, and those take time, and those require tests and things like that. And so it is never ending. Right. And I have let some other certifications. I used to have the SHRM certification, SPHR, and I couldn't keep up with every single list of required certifications. It's expensive, it's time consuming. And so I think you do have to pick and choose what's going to be right for you, and what's going to really get you where you want to be and support your goals. Because, people have suggested to me, have you thought about going back for a coaching certification? And I've thought about it because I do like to learn. And I think, meeting with a group of people with shared interests definitely has benefits. But I have to think hard about it, because now I'm going to have another certification where I have to get CEUs and maintain that and do all of those steps. And it would be more for me nice to have versus a need to have. But I definitely think you have to understand that there's not, for most of these things, there's not an end point. There's a maintenance process. And if I don't get those CEUs, I have to sit for the EAAA again, which, quite frankly, if I ever had to do again in my life, I don't think I would, because that was a whole summer of spending every evening and weekend studying, and it was miserable. And I passed, and I just
and you don't
can't doing it again.
I know, same experience when I took my comprehensive exams. We were studying our little cohort for the entire summer, and going out of those exams, it's like, this is it. I just cannot imagine doing it again. I have to pass, because if I don't pass, I'm not going to sign up for it again. But with regard to the certification, certainly if your job requires, you're a licensed psychologist and your job requires you maintain that licensure, that's a different thing. My wife's a registered nurse, and there's certain things that she has to do to maintain that status. Does that mean that she needs to get, quote, new certifications in order to continue her career or in order to learn new things? No, but she does have to maintain this thing if she wants to keep her job. So that's certainly a different thing. But tell us a bit about the book, though, because a lot of our students, we've got students who are going through their dissertation process and who envision some sort of new career on the other side of that process. That's the reason, we talked about intentionality a little bit earlier. That's their reason why. That's why they're pursuing their doctoral degree, is maybe to switch gears a little bit or to level up. And even the process of writing the book, I think, would be interesting for some folks, because we have people who also like to work in that expert space who want to get their book out there. We help with that as well. I think both parts of that story will be very interesting to folks.
So I think, the book was similar to the PhD. I've always wanted to write a book, but for me, I didn't just want to write a book. I wanted to write a book that was needed on the shelves. And I think that is in part what took me so long to write it. I would say beginning to end, it took me about 7 years. So, it's my next PhD.
It was a dissertation, yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't that I was writing constantly. It was that, clarity comes through action. So you'd write, and then you'd sort of test it, and then you'd be like, wow, this isn't the right direction, or I haven't narrowed my focus, or I didn't create a great avatar for my audience, and it's too broad. And so you go back and forth, and I hired editors to kind of help me with modifying, and then I take a break from it. But anyway, I think it took me a few years to even figure out what that table of contents would actually be, because I was all over the place. I knew it was going to be a career book, but I wasn't sure what career book. And then when through my work and through my research and my piloting and interviewing people, what I learned was that there was 750 books out there on exploring new careers, but there wasn't a single book on, once you decide you want to make a big change, how to get there. There are lots of great career books on getting a job, but not one specifically written for people who are making a big pivot mid-career. And so that became the book.
I read so many statistics about how people legitimately have, you probably know the numbers better than I do, but is it like 3 or 4 careers, most people? Not like jobs, but literally we're doing different things. I've been a software developer, a professor, an entrepreneur. And there's probably something else if I think about it, but I'm probably on my 3rd or 4th career.
8, 9, 10, 11. It's pretty common, and it's going to just get to be more common because of how quickly technology is getting implemented into the workplace, and some industries are emerging that we've never seen before, and others are going away. So I think it's going to be pretty commonplace to have 10, 11, 12 careers.
Wow. So how do you approach that? If you're thinking, like I said, with our students in particular, they're working through the dissertation. A lot of them are looking to either up level or switch careers after they graduate. What sort of things should they be thinking about?
So I think it depends where you want to go. I think a lot of people get a PhD because they want to work in a university. And if you want to work in a university, there's some pretty specific paths that are in place. And obviously they want to see you doing published research and peer-reviewed research and things like that. if you're
Primarily,
looking
that's not our audience, because we look at the dissertation or the doctoral degree process as being, there's two types of doctoral students. The traditional one who does go that path and they want to be a research professor, and then what we call unconventional doctoral student is going to do something else. They're going into industry somehow, maybe hang out a shingle, something like that. So most of our folks are not really interested in that publish or perish career path, but rather maybe teaching at a university that doesn't require publications, or maybe something else completely, something completely different. Many of them in that kind of expert field, though, where they're going to be either a hired gun, or they're going to hang out their own shingle, or maybe they're just going to be highly positioned in an organization as an expert.
Yeah, so I would say you have to know your audience and you have to know your target, and then start to, even before you graduate, start to market yourself. I knew for me that I wanted to go back into business and that I wanted to work in a firm that did leadership and executive assessment and development assessment and required PhDs and looked for PhDs. And it's a kind of a niche field. And I started networking with all of the people who, I knew or could find who worked at these companies. And, the great thing about being a student is that you could say, hey, I'm a student, I'm starting to research, I graduate in a year, and get that information, build those relationships, and start to see where you might be a fit. And I think if you don't have that target and you don't start early, you're going to feel like you're behind, because networking and building relationships and having a clear target are going to be so important to making any kind of pivot. And I tell people this all the time: degrees are great. They show a lot of skills, as we've talked about before, but they don't get you in the door. It's not enough. You need to have relationships. You need to have concrete experience. They want to see a commitment to that field. They don't want to see somebody who just wants a job. They want somebody who's hungry for their particular organization and has been spending the last 6 months talking to people from the organization, demonstrating their interest. So I think that is the step. Figure out where you want to be and start building relationships, and make sure that target is very specific, because you can't dual brand on LinkedIn. You can't be everything to everybody. And if you try and do that, you're not going to be anything to anybody, because people are going to see you as too broad, and you have some things but you don't quite fit. So getting that clarity is, to me, one of the most important things.
It's super important. Going back to the relationships, I was having this discussion with my son literally this morning. I mentioned he's in high school, and there is an academy, basically a program, a track within his school that he would like to get into. He wants to be a surgeon, and they have a special track for that, essentially. And I told him, well, you need to reach out to these people and find out, what you can do about getting into that program. And he didn't know exactly how to get in touch with his counselor, so he asked his math teacher, and he does very well in math, and his teacher likes him a lot, and she helped him figure out how to get in touch with his counselor. And I asked him, did you ask her if she could help you get into that academy? He's like, no, she told me how to get to the counselor. I'm like, know what your goal is and talk to the person about that, because you never know what person's going to be like, oh yeah, the person who runs that program is my best friend. I'll talk to him. You're in, no worries. And just having that relationship there is so powerful, and you never know what kind of dividends it could pay off. So that's huge. And then the notion of knowing what you want and what you don't want. If you're not pushing people away, you're not bringing anybody towards you. So that's something that's difficult for a lot of folks early on, to realize that you have to push people away in order to truly get to where you want. Otherwise, like you said, you're going to be nothing to anyone when you're trying to be everything to everyone.
I do think it's about being focused and targeted and assertive. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature, which is why I did that as part of my dissertation. But the fact is, when you are targeted and when you have a passion and a strength and an expertise in a certain area, it's a little bit easier to be assertive, because you've done the work. And I think when you've done the work, you're going to have a much better conversation with somebody than if you're kind of scattered and you're not sure what you want to do and you're not sure what you want from them. So I think that self-reflection, that time to define what you really want to do, is going to be so well worth it. But you do have to start early. If you start once you graduate, and I know a lot of people sort of wait because let's face it, you're busy in your PhD program, then it might take some runway time. So you just have to know. And, not every organization values a PhD in the same way. And so you have to figure out where are organizations that value what I'm bringing and value the deep expertise I have in this area, and make sure that you're targeting those. And it's the same thing with an MBA or any degree. There are certain ones that are like, we love MBAs, and there's others it's like, we could take it or leave it, but what else you got? So you really have to know what your audience values.
Absolutely. We've got the book, so obviously folks who are interested in this can grab the book. Is it on Amazon? Is that right?
It's on Amazon. Yeah, it's hard to miss. So
show notes. But you do some coaching in this area too. Is that right?
So, well, I work at the Wharton School. So I work with executive MBAs, and more and more they want to make career changes mid-career, and they're at, a certain level in their career. So that's essentially what the book, is about. It's about how to brand yourself to the audience, how to pull out of yourself what's relevant, not necessarily what's most impressive. And sometimes those are the same things, but other times they're not. And we all know that we get very tied to our identity, and that identity could sometimes be great, and other times it can get in our way. So I think particularly when you're switching jobs, you have to understand your audience and what is relevant, and start with that so that you capture their attention. And, and then building your network. And that's really what this book is about, getting around the process of applying online and going through the gymnastics of applicant tracking systems and things like that. Because quite frankly, those processes don't even work very well for traditional candidates. So if you're a switcher, you're going to really be disappointed with the reaction or the impact those have in your career search.
And this is amazing. It echoes 100% that conversation I was talking about. I was having with my son this morning, that, there's probably an application process and you can try to go through that. But what you really want to do is find somebody who knows somebody, because that's how you get in. And I told him that echoes throughout life, and I'm going to send this podcast to him so he hears somebody else say this.
I think as a parent, somebody else needs to say it. It's just standard,
Yeah. So, what one piece of advice would you give folks that are looking to switch careers about networking here? We're 2021 right now. Hopefully we're kind of pre-post pandemic. I think we're all getting tired of it. We're hopefully moving out of the woods, but still things aren't back to normal yet. So what advice would you give somebody, your one best tip for networking in the current climate?
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate the people you already know. I did my whole TEDx talk on this because as an introvert, I hear people say all the time, I'm not good at it. I don't really know anyone. I get flustered. It feels schmoozy. And, I say one of the easiest places you can network is with the people in your life, whether that's your classmates or your faculty or the staff. I think are great to network with. I mean, think about how many classes they've helped. Certainly your family, your community friends, if you're in extracurricular activities or industry groups. But oftentimes we don't talk about our career goals in specific terms with the people who already trust us, already have a relationship with us, and want to see us succeed. And so I think we very much need to become comfortable with saying, hey, I'm going to be graduating in 6 months, and I'm not sure if you know, but the top 3 companies I'm targeting are A, B, and C. And I was curious if you know anyone. And you might think, well, of course my spouse doesn't know anyone, or of course my neighbor who I talk to every day doesn't know anyone because they're in a different field. But that's so not true these days. We all are on social media. We all have friends who have friends and spouses and families. And you'd be surprised if you can give somebody a specific way to help you, whether that's a company or you've seen somebody on their LinkedIn that you want to meet. They're going to be able to help you in different ways and get you to that next step. So I think the biggest piece of advice is don't underestimate anybody because they're not in your field or because they're not working. I mean, maybe they're retired, but that doesn't mean they don't have a whole lifetime of connections who might work or know somebody who works in the place you want to be. And I think that to me is the best advice I can share, because I think we all need to look at the job search as an ongoing process. We talked about this a few minutes ago, we're all going to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 jobs, which means we're all going to be in a job search. And so it has to become much more of a social process than a solitary one. And I know people feel vulnerable putting it out there and asking for help. But if we all look at it like, well, wait, we're all going to be doing this, then it's just my turn this time and it might be that person's turn next time, then I think we're going to find a lot more leads and a lot more opportunities in our lives.
Yeah. And I want to come up with some better terminology than asking for help, because a lot of people do feel like it's a sign of weakness or vulnerability or something in some way. And I wish that people could turn that around and see it as a source of strength. Hey, I'm confident enough. I know what I want. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. And now I'm leveraging my relationships, my network, whatever assets I have available to me, I'm leveraging those things. Does that mean that, when you're giving to other people, shouldn't you expect at some point they might be giving back to you? That's kind of the nature of friendship and relationships in general. And for some reason, a lot of people have that notion of, oh, I don't want to reach out for help. Well, you're not reaching out for help. This is, like you said, it's your turn. You've helped other people, and now they're helping you, and it's not a quid pro quo. It's not a transactional thing. It's just the way that societies work, and for some reason people have a hard time with that. I wish we could figure out how to brand that so that people looked at it as a strength rather than a weakness.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it needs to be on that continuum in particular. I just think it needs to be a natural part of life. If you get a new puppy, you might ask people for a veterinarian, and you wouldn't think twice about doing that, because you're like, oh, my neighbor has 3 dogs. I'm going to ask them what vet he takes those dogs to. And
your neighbor is going to be happy that you asked, because they're going to feel like, hey, I'm the expert dog raiser, and this person saw my expertise and came to me to get advice. A lot of people don't like to take advice, but everybody likes to give advice. So when you actually go asking for it.
Well, I mean, think about how much time it saves you as a new dog owner than, having to look things up or go through reviews on Yelp and all that. I mean, so that's where I think networking helps us all become more efficient and more effective. And yes, when it comes to our jobs, we feel like it's very personal versus asking for a veterinarian. I get that it's a different thing, but I think that's my point, is I think we all need to get to the stage where it's not any different than asking for a veterinarian or a mechanic or a great Italian restaurant or anything like that, because the notion of, if I was good enough, I wouldn't need help, is so not the case in the world of job search now, because the fact is, you don't even get to the decision makers a lot of times without a referral. So it's not about you being good enough or not good enough. You don't even get the chance to have that conversation without a contact.
And that's true in so many areas in life. I mean, go look at anybody who's super successful and ask them if they had a mentor, ask them if they had a coach. You'll be hard pressed to find someone that's super successful that won't proudly tell you, yes, this is what I sought out, what I found, and how that journey worked. So to get someone to help you, like you said, get that referral, get that foot in the door, it's important. And to leverage your network and to think of it like, I like what you said, that it's not your turn, so to speak. This is just normal. This is just natural, just like you'd ask about a mechanic or a vet or anything like that. So really cool. So Dr. Graham, what if folks would like to continue this conversation with you in some way? They're thinking about switching or, anything that we've talked about here today. What's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say find me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find, and I often post a lot of free advice, free articles there. I've also done 4 LinkedIn Learning courses. So if you like doing online learning, I've done a whole course on the book Switchers, and one on visibility if you're looking to get a promotion and getting into the mind of the hiring manager. And so there's a number of things that if you like anything you heard today and want to learn more about it, there's a lot of things out there where you can find a deeper dive into all of that. And of course, the book goes into that in extreme detail. And it's interesting because I do think Switchers is going to be something that isn't even a real term anymore in the next decade, because we're all going to be making so many pivots with the changes in the market and the economy and technology, and we're all going to be reskilling and getting new certifications and re-educated and everything. So I'm excited for that to happen, because I do think while a lot of people feel a little bit vulnerable as the traditional career paths start to kind of crumble away, I think for all of us, especially those who love learning and love growing and went on to get their PhDs, I think part of what is so exciting about these changes is that we can continue to learn and grow and do new things. And that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So we will definitely, for those of you who weren't able to write that down, go to our show notes, go to dissertationdone.com/blog. You can find Dr. Graham's episode there. And in our show notes, we're going to link to the book so that you can get to Amazon easily, the LinkedIn profile. I think you said you're on Twitter. Is that right?
Yeah, if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at Dr. Dawn Graham.
So we'll put all the good stuff in there and make sure that you guys can get to it easily. So Dr. Graham, thank you so much for being with us here today. I really enjoyed this, and I think our audience will really benefit from this conversation about switching careers and networking and all these fun things.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. And thank you for inviting me on. And I really look forward to seeing the episode.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Remind everyone that today's episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you might be struggling with your dissertation, or it's coming and you don't want to struggle with your dissertation, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. And if you finish with that whole thing and you're really interested in diving into the expert space, let's get you to become a published author. We can help you out there at dissertationdone.com/book. Again, Dr. Graham, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much.
And for everyone else, have a wonderful day and go out and live your unconventional life.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.